Recording is on.
Every time we do that, everybody goes completely silent. Everybody's laughing like, oh my God. Then it's like recording's on. Everybody's like,
yeah, the first time we did it, I didn't know that it was going to do that. And I'm sure that my face was pretty fabulous when it happened, because it sounds very official, like something really big is going to happen. But Sergeant King, I'm jealous of your commute. It took me about 38 minutes to get in today. And on normal days, I try to plan for an hour and 15 just in case. So the roads this morning were much nicer than they have been pre-COVID, but all my friends are coming out. They're all here.
we'll probably you want to get started now? Or you want to give it about a couple more minutes?
I will just give it a couple more minutes. People typically dial in around this time. As long as we start by 9:05, we should be good.
Okay. Good morning to everybody that's already here. I see a lot of people on top fan status now. So appreciate you being here. I'm not going to call anybody out as I promised before, but appreciate you all.
How does one gain top fan status? I would like to know.
So, Chief West, go ahead and chime in. Go ahead, please.
Membership is closed. So,
Copy.
It's closed now.
Okay.
It's tough when the chief of diversity says that membership is closed.
Membership is closed.
And inclusion, yes? Okay.
Yes. So our unofficial top fan status is definitely all the faces that we've seen almost every time or have only missed a handful. So we're always excited to see new faces. But I think that there's a handful of people, if Sergeant King and I didn't see, we'd be like, we should check on them this morning. How are they doing? So I think this has been nice for all of us.
That's awesome. I love this.
All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Master Sergeant Julius King. I'm the Career Assistance Advisor at Joint Base Andrews, and I'm joined with my lovely co-host and wing woman, Master Sergeant Melisa Witter from Joint Base Anacostia Bolling and the Pentagon Career Assistance Advisor. So thank you all for being here this morning. If you haven't logged on before, we like to keep this as an open conversation, right? Ask real questions, get real answers. So before we have the chiefs introduce themselves, we'll just say if you do have questions that you don't feel comfortable asking, you can send me or Sergeant Witter a private message. We'll ask the question for you. But we do encourage you to be a part of, like, really jump into the conversation and ask the question yourself. But we do understand that some people aren't comfortable with that, and we're here to facilitate that for you. So without further ado, Chief POLANCO, we'll start with you. If you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you work, and then we'll start like that.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for the intro. Chief Mary Polanco. I started out my career as security forces, cross-trained into medical, did a stint in PME, and most recently was in the legislative fellowship up on the Hill, and now serving in the A1Z, which is Integrated Resilience Office at the Pentagon. That is the oversight for SAPR, suicide prevention and resilience programs for the Department of the Air Force. So I've been there since January, so learning every day. And a little bit about me, I am married to a civilian tennis instructor, and we have 2 kids, 10 and 7. So, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Karen BEIRNE-FLINT. I have been in the Air Force 27 years. I started out as an information manager, which is now an admin. Did that about 7 years. Did PME as an ALS instructor, and then cross-trained into OSI. I've been in OSI for 16 years, and I have currently been the command chief for about 2.5 years. My husband is a retired chief. We have 4 adult children, and I have 3 grandchildren, and 1 is actually due today. So we're patiently waiting to get word. I would love to be with her, but she's in Colorado, and unfortunately with COVID and the stop movement, I'm just sitting here patiently waiting now. So that's me.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Welcome and congratulations in advance. So before we get started, does anybody have any questions they would like to ask to open it up? Nope. All right. So I'll just jump into a first question. I guess my biggest thing would be, could you guys kind of talk to us about what it is that your office does, right? So like in the resiliency office, like what are you guys doing and I guess the mission would stay the same as we're in COVID, but probably ramped up a bit as far as resiliency efforts. And then Chief, for you, I know at your office, I know the operation didn't stop, right? There was no like, hey, we're not doing anything anymore. But in light of a lot of the things going on as far as the protest and things like that, have you guys seen an increase in operations or things you have to watch out for? So that would be my question. Like, what are you guys, what's going on or what's new for your world right now?
Copy. So I'll go first. So for the A1Z office, right now, I think not much has changed as far as our outreach and working on the current initiatives that we have in place. But one thing that has we've kind of taken a detour to more research is looking at how the current situation with the pandemic, as well as protesting, how is that affecting people? And also with our suicide numbers mirroring closer to last year than they did the year prior to that, is that is it an anomaly based on the current environment, or is it still mirroring last year because of the situations of last year, if you will? And so there's a lot of research that our research and analysis department is looking into to try to peel back that. Right now, we don't see that the current state of the world is the reason behind, but I think we can all agree, and it's just too early to tell at this point. And so that's something that we're doing, as well as trying to get ahead of some of the things. For example, having conversations about what this looks like when we return. And so when it hit and we were, a lot of us were placed at home to work, it happened so sudden that we couldn't get out ahead of it. So on the back end of that, we're trying to get out ahead of that and have those conversations and look like how to make sure people get back to work in a way that is a good transition, right? Because I think that if nothing else, what we see is this has affected everybody in such drastic different ways. What affects me on a daily basis is not maybe what affects you, Sergeant King. And so it's just, and really diving deep into that emotional intelligence and figuring out how to talk about these things and be open about them. And as the Integrated Resilience Office, I mean, we must have these conversations and start them off to be an example for that. So we're working on that every single day. Over.
Thank you, ma'am. So OSI, as most of you probably know, we are global. And for those that aren't very familiar, we do have a criminal investigation piece, but we also have a counterintelligence piece. And so COVID by itself has impacted our ability to operate, not necessarily when it comes to the criminal activities, but the counterintelligence to force protection activities, because our number one goal is to keep our airmen safe. And so we have a lot of threats that are potentially taking advantage of our COVID situation, and now with the protesting. And so our focus is really on who is trying to take advantage of this and impact our bases and our airmen. So that's really what OSI has been doing. But we have been very much impacted by the events going on, around the world. And depending on where we are in the world is how they're responding to it. COVID has really changed the way that we go about business, because a lot of our business is face-to-face, person-to-person contact, whether it's creating liaisons with our foreign counterparts or dealing with the communities and our local counterparts outside of our bases. A lot of it is done one-on-one. Even in our investigations, we like to talk to people, and we like to do that in person. And so this has made it very challenging, but we've figured out a way to keep the mission going and ensure that the Air Force, the Department of the Air Force, stays safe. So it has had a big impact on us, but it hasn't stopped us. And so there's no worries about being vulnerable.
Thank you both so much for those responses. I think that kind of covers the professional piece. And Chief POLANCO, you said it best, that what affects you may not affect others. But for yourselves and all your experiences in the Air Force, what have you learned about yourself, like as an airman? What it looks like. We all wear a lot of different hats. And at least for myself, I feel like work was a big distraction, just the process of getting there and being there. And I had this misconception that I would have more time if I didn't have to go to work, right? Like I was like, oh, I'm going to gain 10 hours because I won't have that commute. Spoiler, I did not gain 10 hours. And it's actually, I'm still trying to figure out how time works. So if you could share some of what you figured out during this and some of your challenges, we would really appreciate it.
Chief, did you want to take that one first?
Sure, ma'am. Absolutely. So I learned that I don't have very good discipline when it comes to shutting stuff off around me. Quite like you said, Sergeant Witter, it's like my hours went from 8 to 1700. It went from 6 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night because it's so easy just to walk into the office and sit down and work. And now I am so connected that there's absolutely no time that I'm not doing something that relates to work. Now that was normal even before in my position as the command chief, like I'm always on call, but that transition from driving home from the office to my home, there was kind of a disconnection there. And mentally I'd walk in the house and then I was with my family. And now it's just, for the first probably 8 weeks, I was just always working. I'd get up, I'd come into the office with my coffee and I'd start working and be on the phone. I'm on the phone a lot. I don't think I've been on the phone this much since I was in high school. A lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom meetings. And then of course, once or twice a week, I do go into the office. But it took me probably about 3 weeks ago to realize that I was getting exceptionally tired and I was starting to burn out, and that I needed to keep my, I love having, a schedule. And of course I was thrown off my schedule. I don't need to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. The gyms are closed. So I would sleep into 6 and then roll downstairs. So now it's like, I'm back to having a schedule. And then at 5 o'clock, unless there's something going on that needs my attention, I walk away. And I even have to walk away from, social media and my phones, because that's still a way because now people like email me and text me and FaceTime me and message me, and I don't mind being connected, but I do need that time to disconnect to make me healthier for the next day when I go in to deal with whatever's in front of me for that day. So that really changed me. Not changed me, but that I didn't really see that coming when we started this. I kind of like you was like, oh, I'll have time to clean closets. Yeah, not even close. I don't think I've done anything for the house since we've been in the COVID norm. So, ma'am.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm grateful for throughout all of this is some of these memes out there have to be the funniest things I've ever seen. Like one of them about what you just said about the cleaning. Like I thought I didn't clean because I didn't have time. Nope, that's not the reason for some people. But no, so I personally, so I came into the job in January, and it's not like nothing I've ever done before. And right after that, I was TDY a lot. And then I went to the chief leadership course to be returned home early because of COVID. And we went right into teleworking. So I didn't really get a chance to build the kind of rapport with the team that I wanted. And so I had to learn how to do that over the computer and the phone. And that was challenging for me. But the first couple months, I really had a hard time. I was there was so much pressure. I'm already that way, but then I also now have kids who are being homeschooled, and we're having to figure out that whole situation that just every day is just like everything has to be a certain way and it has to go well. And then I'm, the chief of the organization, and like it was just a lot. And so I had a kind of stare straight ahead moment where when you have so much on your plate, you just don't know what to do. And so I started to peel that back a little bit. And I think one of the things I learned the most was that my best 6-8 months ago looks nothing like my best today. And that's okay. I am doing the best I can today with what I have. My intentions are to work hard and to be present and to be available, but it doesn't mirror myself 8 months ago. And again, that's okay. I cannot do everything. And when you have to admit that to yourself and then kind of be nice to yourself about it, that's hard. That's hard because I've always been my worst critic and we've kind of had a relationship going. And so now I'm kind of like, no, that's not okay anymore. And so that's probably the biggest thing I learned, was to be kind to yourself first and foremost, and just have grace with yourself. And I'm still reminding myself every single day because the struggles are still there, but that was eye-opening for me.
Go ahead. Oh, Chief Wesley, you go ahead.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I have a regarding resiliency and defining what that means for each one of us, right? To the chiefs first. How do you define resiliency? I think I don't want to say it's become a buzzword, but it's become a buzzword. And I think some of our airmen are given it's being used as a tool or as a word for airmen to something they should strive towards. And it seems like it's supposed to be the fix for everything, so it may slowly be turning into something it wasn't intended to be. So I just want to get your take on the word resiliency and what that means to you. Over.
You want to go first? I can take it. Thank you, ma'am. So great question. And you're right. We throw that word around a lot. For me, resiliency is health on many different levels. And being able to have the resources to deal with everything that is thrown at you. And so in that case, it's not a matter of something to strive for. It's something to monitor. And I know in our organization, we make it a priority to ensure that, we're communicating and we're giving, we're building opportunities for our airmen to have an environment of trust, so that when there is things going on in their personal lives or in their professional lives or on the job, that they have the ability to reach out and ask for help early and not later. We are trying to eliminate that stigma of asking for help, because that is, asking for help is part of strength, and that's part of resiliency. Because at the end of the day, my goal for every airman would be, when it is time for you to hang up your uniform or move on to the next adventure in your life, that you have the physical, mental, and emotional health and wellness that you had when you entered into the Air Force, and when you entered into this part of your journey. And in order to do that, this is self-care, right? This is care for our communities and for our teams. And it's understanding our limitations and learning about ourselves and learning about the team and the family, the Air Force family that you're living and working next to, and being able to have frank and honest conversations. But then also have your team and your family member, your Air Force family, understand what's going on in your home, because that is so vitally important to us. And that has a huge impact on our resiliency, because if something's broke at home, I'm not gonna be able to be there. And so to be in touch with that, you have to have an environment of trust. So resiliency is a very complicated question, because there's so many aspects that makes me resilient. Yes, I may be healthy and I may be able to tell you what is going on in my professional life, but maybe I'm not one to talk about my personal life, and that's where I'm breaking down. And so we really have to, when we talk resiliency, to me, it's the health of the person and everything that entails. And so we need to, as senior leaders, as the chief, and in my organization, we work very hard to make sure that this is not something that we're striving for. This is something that we take care of every single day. Just like we take care of, we are the weapon system of our military. We need to take care of ourselves better than we are our aircraft, because we are way more expensive and way more important than the aircraft.
Yeah, I love that. I love the kind of changing and at least talking about the narrative behind what that means, and you using the word health with it. I think that's so key. I also do agree that the buzzword, we tend to really, it's almost like when you say a word over and over and over again, it starts to sound weird. And that's almost what happens when we don't really take the time to define these things for one another. So it's such a good question. I think for me, understanding resilience is all that it encompasses. It's not just because I say the word, I have it, or because I am in a position to be a mentor, I am one, or I'm a wingman and that makes me one. No, it's the effort that you put behind it. It's the act of understanding what that means. And for me, I always equate that with vulnerability. Just working on it every day and trying to figure it out every day, because I might be resilient in one area. I might be on it with making sure my physical health is good to go, but there's other areas where I'm just like, man, I'm laying on the ground and at best you can drag me. And so I think being honest about that process for you as an airman, as a leader, that is really where we start to feel more comfortable with reaching out for the things that are going to fill those gaps for us. And so for me, yeah, what does it mean, generally speaking? Resilience means the ability to overcome, but there is a process to overcome, and we can't skip that conversation between something happening and you recovering and getting back to. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, even personally, I'm never going to return to the person I was 10 years ago, and so just really talking about what that means and what that journey looks like for you, because again, it's different for everybody. I feel like that made a whole lot of sense in my head, but if I'm not, if there needs to be clarifying, please let me know. Or if sounds like I dodged it, I didn't mean to, but that's what it means to me. Over.
No, I think what you said, Mary, was really, really good. The part about there's a process in between you know, the bounce back and bouncing back, right? And I think that from what I'm hearing from a lot of our airmen is it's that part, right? Because for some, resiliency looks like not having a bad day. It looks like you're able to push through, because if you were resilient, you wouldn't have to, you know, take a knee, or you wouldn't have to go see mental health, or you wouldn't have to cry. You wouldn't have to spaz out. You wouldn't have to do these things. And so I love what you said. There is a process in between there. You have been stretched, but resiliency means going through that stretch and then bouncing back. So no, it made perfect sense to me.
Copy. Yeah, that's right on. I think the idea that it's so damaging, that idea that if you are a resilient person, that means you are it all the time, and that you can't, like you said, can't have a bad day. I think that is so dangerous, and we cannot facilitate that narrative at all, particularly in leadership positions. You know, I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. The one thing I would add is resiliency is not a state of mind, because you're right. You're going to be challenged every single day. You're going to be feeling great today, and then tomorrow something's going to happen, and it's going to be a bad day. Resiliency is having confidence in the resources that you have around you to help you get through those trying times, because we're all going to have them. And maybe one day it's going to be just piled on, and I'm going to need to be able to reach out and ask for help. I'm going to need to be able to reach for my family and get support, or to my brothers and sisters in my office and ask, you know, for them to help me get my, you know, with my job, because I cannot manage it today. It's not about being, resiliency isn't about being strong all the time. It's about having confidence and having that backup bench to support you in those matters of challenging and emotionally and stressing times in your life, which every single one of us goes through. I mean, we cannot get away from being challenged and having good times and having bad times. But it's building that bench, building that ability, that capability around us to respond.
So Chief Wesley, thank you so much. This is the first time that what I heard was that we have a stigma around resiliency, right? And to point what Chief Blanco said, it is because we say it so much. And I wrote down to Chief BEIRNE-FLINT what you mentioned about monitoring it versus a fix, because all of those points, we all get hung up on things. And sometimes as wingmen, I think that we contribute to it, because even as I'm, you know, self-evaluating, I'll say things like, oh, I'm resilient. And hence I'm still trying to figure out time and different things. And so you end up struggling on your own. So yeah, definitely thank you for bringing that up. And for anyone on the line to really consider that and talk about it with your people, because sometimes we don't even realize the culture that we're building, right? And so as an airman, I wholeheartedly believe that everything has come out of good intentions or a need. But the same way that we're not the same as we will be 5 years ago, our Air Force isn't the same as 5 years ago, right? So it needs constant attention. And it's up to us to bring up those things, you know, I don't think that resiliency should go away, but I definitely think that we need to talk about the stigma around resiliency, which I just learned about 5 minutes ago. So thank you a lot for that discussion. I appreciate it. We have a lot of folks on the line, some first-time people this morning. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm actually glad we're talking about this topic, because resiliency is one of my big things in the Air Force. I became a resiliency trainer because of it, and the ability to give back to the airmen. But I had a thought this morning before this meeting happened, and it may ruffle some feathers, but like Chief Wesley usually says, you know, to have that uncomfortable talk, we have to have it. Do you believe that we've strayed away from the creed and the core values when we talk about resiliency and suicide as a whole? And I want to say that while we live, and some of us live and breathe these things, I've seen too many not believe in it admittingly and also use it as a checked box. But when we look at our numbers and the stigma as we talk about it, does it really show that we live and breathe the core values and the creed that we embrace as airmen?
Okay. Yeah, so I don't. I don't think that. I don't think we're living by. Well, for one, if I could explain, I don't think we have a good narrative behind the core values, to be honest. I don't think when we hear service before self, if we don't follow that with a very deliberate conversation about what that means, boy, that can be up for interpretation. And when you leave service before self up for interpretation to mean no matter what the cost, I am nothing if I don't put service first, that is devastating. And we have to follow that core value conversation with, that is not what that means. That means that you are aware of all things that encompass you as an airman first, your health first, and you make sure that that is at the forefront. And when you do that, you can show up for the service. And if you don't have those things in check for yourself and you are not healthy and you are not, I mean, we hear the analogy all the time, put your mask on first. And if you don't do that, then you cannot help the person next to you. Therefore, you cannot be a wingman, right? And so that's what I think can be dangerous about some things that other people might view as, and I've heard it because I've been to sister service before, and went to an academy with the sister service, and they're like, your catchphrase for the week. And hey, listen, noted, that could be good feedback. If we don't have those conversations behind the creed and what that means, then it's just another shiny thing that we do. And so I think we could definitely do better, particularly with the core values and particularly with that core value. Also, with integrity, because integrity is not just doing what's right when no one's looking, it's doing what's right when everyone is watching you, because peer pressure can be something. So I think my answer to your question would be, we must do better with regard to explaining what the intent is behind these, and then we have to actually live it. And we have to actually talk to people about when they stray off. Sorry, I'm not meaning to get long-winded, but I think that's important to say when we're talking about the intangibles of our leadership traits. Those are the hardest things to measure. Did you throw your friend under the bus? You never see that on EPR. Completely, was not there to assist a fellow airman when they needed help in training. Like we don't see those things. So the intangibles are where we really need to show that we're living by the core values. Over.
That's great, man. And so I agree with everything you said, and I'm going to take it to the other values that you didn't talk about, excellence in all we do. Because I think when you say excellence, people think perfection. And then there's fear of making mistakes. There's fear of failure. And that drives so much pressure on our young airmen and our NCOs and our young officers and our leaders, because no one they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to be that guy. And so that excellence, I think we really have to talk about that as well. And that's not perfection. That's the best you're doing for today. It's about giving all you have for today. And maybe today I don't have as much as I did yesterday. It's kind of like when we work out. Sometimes we have great workouts. Sometimes, we're barely getting on the treadmill. We just don't have it in us. But that is excellence, because we're putting it as a priority in our life. And then not being afraid of failure, not being afraid to put your neck out there because you have a great idea, or saying something or speaking up because you're afraid something is going to happen to you, or just making a mistake. I mean, and I know this is a message that's coming out of, our senior leaders, but unless we have these conversations with our airmen and give them that background, like the chief said, of what they really mean, that's a lot of stress. And I think that goes in hand with some of the issues that we're seeing across the Air Force. Over.
That was an awesome question. Is it, I can see your rank, is it Sergeant Griffin? Yeah, thanks so much, Sergeant
Yes,
Griffin.
thank you.
So I have a question on top of that, right? So if we talk about we'll hit on the Air Force song. Do you feel like, especially like we'll say with the core values, not the Air Force song, but with the core values and the creed, do you feel like it may sometimes put an undue pressure on people, right? So like we talk about like, we'll never leave an airman behind, but recent reports have shown that we have left a large group of airmen behind. And we say, what?
Here you go. Here you go.
What I'm being, this is a legit question, right? When I say that, right? So not just in that sense. I had a conversation with somebody the other day about like looking in a room, right? It's easy for me to say like, oh, I'm looking in a room and I don't see people like me, but we have 3 top female leaders on this call. How many times have you gone in a room and not seen but one female or just yourself in the room, right? So when I talk about leaving people behind as a whole, like there's any instance where we have left groups of people behind. But on top of that, we put undue pressure, or I feel we put undue pressure on ourselves when the loudest line in our creed is, I will not fail. But then we tell people, go out and fail, because through failure, you learn to be successful. So I guess, like, how do you feel about those things? Are we sending the mixed message? Are we sending the right message? And should we change things? Your mic is muted, Chief.
Every time, at least once every meeting, I do that. I've had this conversation before, and that's a really, really good point. But I think in that respect, when you're talking about our creed as a nation, as a defense force, we will not fail. And that doesn't mean that we aren't going to make a lot of mistakes and trial and error to get to that mission success. And so, for example, Elon Musk wanted to create a rocket that had that was a reusable rocket, right? That was his mission. He did not fail. It took like 12 rockets to get it right, and billions of dollars, but he never gave up. You know, he launched the first one, it blew up, he started over. By the time he got to the rocket that finally was able to come back and land on Earth, he was living on somebody's couch. So, but he never failed at his mission. But he never stopped trying either. And I think that is really that's the point of that creed, is as an Air Force, we won't fail when we are charged to do something. And we're not gonna be scared to not give it a try to get to that mission success. Whatever it takes to be ultimate mission successful doesn't mean that it's gonna be perfect getting there. And you're absolutely right. If we just say we won't fail, that means maybe as a young airman, I'm not going to be able to fail at anything. No, because if this is your goal, how are we going to get there? It's going to be ugly. It's going to be a mess, and we're going to mess up a whole bunch of times, but we're going to get there. And so that, to me, is the ultimate, like, that's what we mean by, because that's our creed. We won't fail, and we never do. The enlisted force, you give us a job to do, we're going to get it done every freaking time. It's going to be ugly. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to get it done. And so that's what that means to me. Over.
I do really appreciate that explanation, for sure. I think even I'm guilty, not guilty, that's not a guilty thing, but I've even really questioned that line itself. I will not fail, particularly when some of our great leaders have said, fail forward. Yep. Fail, yes, but fail forward. And I think we need to change that line to, I will fail forward. but I think what we need to do better is we need to be possibly a little bit more deliberate with the things we're putting out, and maybe get some consensus across the force before we do that. Because I think if that, particularly never leave an airman behind, and I will not fail, those are things that really shouldn't need such an in-depth conversation about. I think maybe we should change that. To answer your question, I would be okay with that. You know what that would show? It would show that we are moving forward progressively and not waiting 70 years to change the Air Force song. That we are moving in a direction where we see something that needs to be revectored, and we revector it because we've listened to the force. And if it's not for the force, we are not. And so I think we definitely have to be a little bit more quick to hear the feedback and have those, those conversations in those think tanks and those, hey, let's pull this together, possibly before we write something, which might make it a little bit easier. But, I think that shows progression for sure. Oh.
Thank you very much for that, Chief C. I know you had your hand up, and then we'll come to text R&Ds after that. We can't hear you, Chief. Nope. I can see you yelling, and it seems intense, but I can't hear you. And today's his birthday, so it's just bad.
Can he write
Yeah, I think he's going to try and sign back in. Sergeant D, do you want to go real quick while we wait for Chief C to get back up and running?
Yes, I'll go. Can you guys hear me? All right, perfect. So I know, we talked about, we're gonna fail, or we talk about, the creed saying, we will not fail, but knowing, I think, for a lot of us, it's common sense to know, like, you're not going to get everything the first time, or it's not going to be perfect the first time. You may fail, up until the 12th time, to make that rocket, successful, or, you may not get rank every time you test for it. I think that, or what can we do to change the narrative of, even though we know we're going to fail, I think a lot of times it's perceived that you cannot fail. And when you do fail, it becomes an issue. Not necessarily that you're not failing forward, but just failing at all sometimes seems that it's a no-go, or seems that, you're supposed to know everything all at once. And I think too, sometimes I think we're failing at the important things. So not necessarily saying that, like, hey, we can't fail at all, but I think we're also failing at the important things. Like Sergeant King talked about the numbers that we've seen across the force. Like, to me, just me personally, I think we're failing in those areas. So saying that, job performance is important. So what can we do to change the narrative that you can't fail at all? So even though we know that you can fail because we're human, what can we do to change the narrative and get people to actually act on the, hey, you're going to fail and it's okay?
Chief, do you want me to go first? Okay. So I think to answer the question, what can we do to change the narrative, has to be done through action. And I mean that in a sense of leadership has to, because no matter what rank you are still failing at something. And so when you are failing at something, show that. Take deliberate opportunities to talk about that with people. Because if I never saw, which I never did, I never saw my chief fail. You kidding? Like, that was not a thing. I don't want to perpetuate that and be part of that problem. So I just put my heart on my sleeve and say, this is where I'm struggling. This is where I made a mistake. I remember a situation where I was struggling at work as a superintendent, and I made what I thought was the best decision for an awards scenario. I tried to be fair. I tried to take myself out of the situation. Very long story short, I made a huge mistake. And I was faced in that moment with, am I worried about image over this? or am I worried about what's right? Because if I admit that I made this mistake, oh my goodness, my credibility is probably going to be out the window. And I was faced, and I knew when I could not sleep at night. I knew what the right answer was. I'd never been faced with that kind of ethical dilemma before, to that degree, because I was never in that position. And so I woke up the next day and I went to the individual and I admitted I made a huge mistake. And this is how I made that mistake. Not just that I did it, but this is what I identified in the process of how I got there, how I made the mistake, and how I plan to fix it. And I apologized. And then we got into a deeper conversation and I said to him how I was feeling, like you were just going to never trust me again. And he said, the fact that you did this has built the trust that we needed. And so that's something you have to remember, is when you come forward and you show your mistakes and you show your failures, you are building something by doing that. So we can't change the narrative just by standing in front of a crowd, or even standing in front of your folks and saying, feel free to fail. They don't know what that looks like. They have to see what that looks like. And they have to see that you're going to be standing right next to them to pick them up right before they hit the ground. Right. So just personal testimony that we just need to be more open about it. Over.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is and I think, Chief, you hit the nail on the head. It's basically being vulnerable. We need to be vulnerable. We can't expect, like you said, we can't say one thing and then look perfect to everybody else, or give off the impression that, we are, our resiliency is 100% all the time. We need to be vulnerable, and we need to show, because this is, people, regardless. I mean, this is how, I remember, like, growing up, you want to be, you asked me about, who was my mentors and my great leaders. And I remember what was done to me, or what I saw as an airman my entire life. It's like, well, I know this was done, this wasn't done, this was horrible at this location. And so I do what I have seen. That's at least where I started as a leader, is I was repeating the things that I liked from past leaders. And so if this is, if we need to teach our airmen to fail forward, not be afraid to put themselves out there, because that's really what they're doing, is they're putting themselves out there to be vulnerable, and it may not go right. Is, as leaders, we have to show them how to do that. And you know what? Maybe we're not very good at it either, or we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So that vulnerability is hard, because in some way, shape, or form, we feel like that's a form of weakness, when actually it's a form of strength. So I think that our actions will speak louder than words. And then what does failure look like, and what does failing forward look like? That's things that we have to explore. And like the Chief said, put it in context of, okay, you making a mistake, that's not an evaluation bullet. That's getting to the goal. Here's the goal I want you to get to. And whatever happens in between, as long as you're working to, if that's the goal, then once you meet the goal, then that's what's going to be reflecting on you, not necessarily how you got there. Over.
Hello? Oh, got it to work. Yeah, finally. Hey, just two quick thoughts. Back to the service before self. I had a good friend of mine told me, hey, Steve, it's not service before self. It's service before self. It's not service rather than self. And I think sometimes people get that twisted. You got to take care of yourself before you can help others. So it's service before self. I got it, but it's not service rather than self. There's times where you have to take care of your family and take care of yourself to be ready to help others and to be that team member. And I think it's important with the failure and sharing stories, being transparent, like the Chiefs mentioned, because that's how others gain confidence in being, okay with that failure. Because if not, if you ham them up as soon as they fail or make a mistake, versus hold them by their side and walk with them, they'll always remember that, and that'll be their norm. Winston Churchill has a saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. And I always like to add to that, says, if you're going through hell, call me, I'll walk with you, and we'll get through this together one way or another. I usually always share a story when I was a young airman, a young medic. staff sergeant. I thought I was the best medic in the world. I could save the world single-handedly. But on deployment, one time I actually gave somebody expired blood and could have killed the individual. But I realized what I did, and right away let people know, that hey, this is what I did. This is the blood number. This is the tracking that goes behind it. And I didn't get hemmed up. The captain that was out there, my doc, all she did was ask me to put together an instruction and a policy on how to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And that trust and that relationship that we built from there on, I could tell anybody that I messed up, because I feel confident that they're not going to hem me up. They're going to help me to stand back up, to move forward and make it better for everybody else, not just, for me. It was never on EPR. It was never reported. Still got a medal out of that deployment and everything. It's like it never happened. But it was impactful to me, because it showed that the faith and the trust of the individual that they had in me to continue to do what I was doing. And that's resonated with me the way I work with other airmen and other officers as well too. So that stuff rubs off, like the chief mentioned. Your other predecessors and your leaders that you look up to, you pick up on that, and that makes a difference. So the more positive aspects we can have, and the more we can help others get through stuff, I think it'll be contagious, and it'll continue on the generation and generation.
Thank you so much, Chief. I was happy you're able to get your audio to work. That really added to that conversation. So we're coming close to the top of the hour. I'd like to open the floor for one last question before we ask the chiefs, what you're reading right now. And then we'll do our closing remarks, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you tomorrow for Coffee with Chiefs. All right, so going once, going twice. I'll just quickly share that this is one of the best conversations I've had about resiliency in a really long time. I was a mental health technician for almost 8 years of my career, so I've had a lot of resiliency conversations, and a lot of them may have just been those right out of the box and then general questions. So I really appreciate everyone's honesty and participation, and sometimes for an airman that's been in as long as, for any amount of time, but for me, I think sometimes we take our core values or our creed or our song as almost like robot, that's just embedded in us, and we don't think about it as much. We just say the words. So I really appreciated the additional conversation we had about that this morning. I guess that Chief POLANCO, if you'd like to go ahead first, let us know what you're reading and closing remarks. And then Chief BEIRNE-FLINT, I would really appreciate it.
Sure. So I discovered that I needed to get out of my house more recently for obvious reasons. And I started walking, which I hadn't really done. I've just, do a HIIT workout, I'm done. So I started walking, and I started doing audiobooks, and I'm listening to Brené Brown, Daring Greatly. And I'm about halfway through. I've seen her Netflix special about Call to Courage. And I cannot recommend enough, if you're a visual person, you want to watch that on Netflix, but the book mirrors it. I believe she wrote it first, so it's a lot about those things. But yeah, that book is amazing. You cannot reach the pinnacle of who you are if you don't know who you are, and if you're not understanding all the things about you. And that book will help you. I believe it's helping me. So yeah, so that's what I'm into right now. A lot of self-help books. My next audio book is Start With Why, Simon Sinek. So yeah, over.
So I did read Start With Why. Actually, I do a lot of audiobooks, and then so currently I am reading and listening to The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And so I started on the audiobook, but then there's a lot of things that I like, so I always buy the book, and then I kind of do both. I just finished a book called Switch, and that's with Chip and Dan Heath. This is about change and the human being. And so with everything that's going on, and I talk about how do we change a culture, how do we change the perceptions that we've lived with. I think that would be, I would recommend that to at every level of leadership within the Air Force, because it really kind of opens your eyes to why is it so hard to change as a human being, your emotion based on your, the blatant fact, oh, this is good for you. Yeah, but why do I have such a hard time changing how I feel versus what I know to be true? So I would recommend that book. So thank you.
So before we go, I wanted to say thanks for allowing us the opportunity to be here with everybody today. This has meant a lot to me. I selfishly have needed this kind of conversation to help with my own motivation and internal drive. It's just, it's been a hard 3 months. So I really appreciate that. And I also, I don't know if you have plans of it, but you know how we're talking a lot about having difficult conversations surrounding race relations. If you have any of those, I would really like to be a part of that conversation. I think I have to say I'm very proud of our Air Force for saying yes and encouraging these conversations to take place, because for a lot of forever, we have not felt a comfortable, safe space to share our real feelings. And so I think that I just want to encourage us, if you're not doing it in this type of forum, that you're doing it with your people back in your sections and in your organizations. And yeah, so that's all I wanted to say about it. Thanks.
And I also want to say thank you. This has been great. Sergeant King, Sergeant Witter, what you're doing is awesome. Giving people a place to talk and learn and come together. I think this is amazing. I'm really honored to have been part of it, and I would absolutely love to do whatever it is you guys need help with. I am here. I'm here to serve. So let me know what I can do for you all, and that's what I'm here to do. Sergeant POLANCO, it's been nice to meet you, ma'am, and I look forward to chatting with you in person. So just thank you all for putting this on.
Likewise, Chief.
All right. So thank you guys both, right? Thank you everybody that participated today. Thank you, Chiefs, for being here. I know we had some really good questions, so I appreciate everybody's input today. So Chief, I probably keep saying it wrong, so I apologize, but Chief POLANCO, or is it POLANCO?
It's POLANCO.
Chief POLANCO. So as you said that, we would like to probably do a special delivery where we do like just a whole thing just on resiliency, and kind of talk about what you guys have going on in your office, just to kind of get it out there to the masses and have that conversation. I think that would be great, and everything like that. I had a whole bunch of profound words and stuff that I wanted to say in closing remarks, but I would be remiss if I did not take this time. And if everybody could join in and we sing happy birthday to Chief Com and to our first sergeant, yes, Master Sergeant Parks, even though her camera isn't on, because Chief, you did remind me that it's her birthday too. So if we could all just sing a very special happy birthday to these two, I think that would be amazing. So is everybody with me?
We're with you.
Yeah,
Everybody's mic is on. Y'all gonna just have me out here singing, sounding crazy. Anyway, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Chief Sergeant Parks. Happy birthday to you.
You guys sound amazing. Happy birthday, Chief. Thanks, guys.
And that was recorded.
And it was. Bam. Album coming soon. See y'all tomorrow.
Have a great day. Thank you,
That's
everyone.
awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.